Hello, my name's Greg Brock. I'm a member of the Lexington Storytellers. I'm going to tell you a Chinese folk tale. The title is The Jade Stone. Around 2,000 years ago, give or take, the Emperor of China was vain and cruel, mean. Everyone high and low feared him. China itself was stuck. Everyone was afraid to try anything new for fear the emperor would disapprove, and sometimes the costs of his disapproval were horrendous. The emperor's mind was a swirling storm of flashes and clouds, and it was devoid of all tranquility. He had never experienced calmness. And this is not for want of trying. The best teachers of the contemplative arts in China, which are well advanced, came to teach him about tranquility, but they all failed. One day in court, a large gift arrived. It was wrapped in burlap and tied up with heavy ropes. Its shape was like the back of a large turtle, and it was so big that a person could not reach around it. The emperor instructed his advisors to unwrap it, and when they did, jaws throughout the court dropped to the floor. Everyone was amazed at this magnificent, perfect Jade Stone. As soon as he saw it, the emperor knew what he wanted carved, because jade is for carving, you know. And so he instructed his advisors to find a carver among those at the court. But they all refused. They said the project was just too big for them. In reality, they were all afraid that the emperor would not like their carving, or perhaps if they made a mistake and shattered the jade stone, the costs would be impossible to bear. So the three advisors went outside the court. They knew of an itinerant stone carver who lived in a nearby village. Chan Lo was his name. Chan Lo loved to walk along the river that ran near his village, picking up stones and looking at them and thinking about what they might become. His business, and he had a decent business, enough to make a living even though it was a spare one. His business was to load up his cart with stones and go out into the farms nearby, talk to the farmer, find out what the farmer might like, maybe what was farmed, and then he would, with some element of ritual, go over to his cart and pick out a stone, look at it carefully, and then place it on the wheel of his cart. And then with great calm, he would fold his hands and he would say, "Here I stand, O noble stone, to carve a creature of your own. Send me signs and sounds of rock, that I, your humble servant, may unlock." And then he would lean in and listen, or at least pretend to listen. And he would say, "Oh, it wants to be a duck." And he would glance at the farmer, and if the farmer approved, then that's what he would carve. Chan Lo was brought before the emperor, who was not much impressed. Chan Lo was a scruffy, scrawny little guy with ragged clothes and a torn straw hat, no shoes. The emperor asked, Is this the best you could do?" The three advisors said, "Yes, he can do a good job." "Very well, then," said the emperor. "Chan Lo, I want you to carve a dragon of wind and fire. This dragon of wind and fire will draw the storm out of my mind and leave me with tranquility." Well, this was a tall order. Nonetheless, the only thing Chan Lo could say is, "I will do my best, sire." The stone was hauled off to Chan Lo's garden by the emperor's guards, where it sat for a long time. Sort of out of sight, out of mind was what was working. Chan Lo stayed away from it. However, one evening, after he had had his rice cake and decaffeinated green tea, he felt drawn to the stone, and his love of stone put him there. He stood before it, examining it, and the inertia of the moment overcame him, as it would regularly with his business, and he folded his hands and in a lackadaisical way said, in a perfunctory way, he said, "Here I stand, a noble stone, to carve a creature of your own. Send me signs and sounds of rock, that I, your humble servant, may unlock." And, as he usually did, he leaned in, pretending to listen. A real sound! He heard a real sound. It was patar. Patar. What an odd sound. Is that a sound a dragon makes? He thought. Oh, patar. Well, perhaps that's the sound their tails make when they splash in the surf. Yeah, well, maybe. He decided to go again, folded his hands, and asked for signs and sounds of rock, and he leaned in as he did before. Another sound, a new sound. It was boop, boop, boop. Is this a sound of a dragon, he thought? Do dragons make that kind of sound? I don't think so. This is all very confusing. But, well, perhaps that is the sound that they make as they blow bubbles out their noses when they're rising up from the deep. Oh, it was all very confusing. These were not dragon sounds. Nonetheless, he went a third time, laid his hands, and he listened in. Nothing. Silence. For the first time, he reached out and he touched the stone, and he felt very, very tiny ridges. And as his hand stroked the stone, he could hear very odd, he thought. Are these dragon scales? I thought dragon scales were large, if you could touch one. All very confusing. Nonetheless, Chan Lo felt the pressure of time. He needed to produce a carving. And even though he was confused about what to carve, he picked up his tools and he began to carve very slowly and very carefully. He carved for a year and a day. And when he was finished, the large turtle-shaped stone that a person could not reach around was a small carving about like this. He placed a cloth over it, and in the early morning, before the birds are awake, he stole away to the great hall. And in the great hall, there was a table in the middle. He placed his carving on the table, covered with the cloth, and then he hid in the shadows. In the morning, when the three advisors arrived, they were puzzled by something that was on the table in the middle of the hall. And then one of them noticed Chan Lo hiding in the shadows and said, "Ah, it is Chan Lo's carving," he whispered. He went over and looked underneath the cloth. No dragon, he said. They all started to shake because they were so fearful of what the emperor would think. Well, at that moment, the emperor walked into the room and said, "What is this in the middle of the great hall?" And they all pointed to Chan Lo and to the carving. "It is Chan Lo's carving," they said. He reached over and grabbed the cloth and pulled it off. And he said, "Where is my dragon of wind and fire?" His voice thundered and flashed. "Bring me Chan Lo." The guards caught Chan Lo and threw him at the emperor's feet. "What have you done, you fool? You have ruined that perfect and magnificent piece of jade stone." "Oh, please, your majesty," said Chan Lo. I am sorry. I did not hear your dragon. I did not hear it. I could only carve these 3 small carpfish swimming gently in the great celestial pool. Please have mercy on me." "You fool, you have ruined it. Take him away," said the emperor. They threw Chan Lo in the dungeon beneath the celestial palace. "And take this thing and put it by the celestial pool." Oh, the 3 advisors, wanting to keep the attention on Chan Lo, ran to the emperor. They said, "What punishment for Chan Lo?" One of them said, "Cut him into 1,000 pieces." Another one said, "Boil him in oil." The emperor said, "I will let my dreams decide what punishment for Chan Lo." That night, the emperor tossed and turned. He heard strange sounds, pata, pata, and whoop, whoop. Early in the morning, very early, before the birds are awake, he awoke and felt drawn to the carving by the celestial pool. He found himself standing before it. He reached out and he touched the carving, and he heard shh. And at that moment, his mind became calm. And for the first time, he experienced tranquility. In the morning, the 3 advisors approached the emperor. They found him in deep meditation before the carving. They asked him, "What punishment for Chan Lo?" The emperor smiled an imperial smile and said, "Bring me Chan Lo." Chan Lo was brought and thrown at the emperor's feet. "Please, your majesty, I beg mercy." It takes a brave man to defy the great emperor of all China, Chan Lo. But you have carved what you heard. And now I have heard it too. My mind is at rest. And for this I thank you. What reward would you ask? "I would ask only to return to my village, because my greatest happiness is your pleasure in my work. But I would prefer to walk along the river and pick up stones and think what they might become." The emperor became a calm and benevolent leader, a wise leader. China blossomed, and in its time became the most advanced civilization in the world.